Hi, welcome to this edition of Married to Cinema. I'm Brian.
I'm Whitney,
I love movies.
and I don't.
So, in this edition, we're talking about the Oscar winning film by the writer director of Road Trip and Old School and the Hangover Trilogy and several others, Todd Phillips. We're talking about Joker.
Yeah, and I actually really like this movie, and it was my pick, so it's a little different than normal.
Yeah, it was one that I've had mixed feelings on, so I thought it would be a good one for us to revisit,
Mm-hmm.
for me to also reevaluate how I feel about it, and give you our take on it. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about the story of the film?
Sure. I'm a fan of Batman, particularly Batman villains, and one of the things about them is that the majority of them have a very ridiculous backstory of how they became how they were.
Mm-hmm.
There is no backstory for Joker. He just shows up in the original strand of comics, unlike Harleen Quinzel or Edward Nygma, or I can't think of Poison Ivy's last name, Pamela something. But anyways, they all have stories. They have reasons. There is nothing for Joker. That's what makes him one of the most iconic villains in history, the history of comic books, in my opinion. Rocky, get out of the picture.
Cameo by Rocky.
Because he has no story. So when Brian told me a few years back they were going to do this movie, I was like, well, that's going to not be good because there's nothing there. But they've done a good job. So you open up on this character, Arthur Fleck, and you don't have a name for Joker in the original comic strand. Like, maybe on some offshoots, but this is the first time we've got a name.
Yeah.
And he works as a clown. He lives with his mom, takes care of his mom. He works for a company called Ha-Ha's. And they hire clowns out, it seems. But it also, we can see very early on that he's attending some sort of it almost seems like a court mandated wellness check through social services or something, where he's going and the local government is kind of funding for him to get counseling because he is suffering from some kind of mental illness, some kind of issue. It alludes early on that he has previously maybe been in an institution for the mentally unwell, but it doesn't straight out say. We know he's on medication very early on because they ask, are you taking your meds? But things seem okay-ish. Like, he's clearly still not right. He's clearly struggling with inner demons. I mean, he's talking about death and sort of considering that, and he's really just distraught with the world, which I find very relatable. Like, so many times in the movie, he's like, this world sucks. I mean,
Yeah, and this film is set in 1981, so it's a different world, but only to some degree, shall we say.
yeah. And, I don't. Well, so in the first half, you find out that. Well, in the first. Not very far in. You find out that this business or social service officer or whatever that's been providing him the counseling and the medication has been cut of their funding. So he's no longer going to be able to get his medication. We know that he is, he knows enough about his personal situation to have the foresight to ask, who do I talk to about getting my medication now? But they don't have an answer for him. So we kind of know early on, dang, okay, this might mess things up. But you don't remember that? In my opinion, it skims over it. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I agree. And the film is really about Arthur on the verge of this mental collapse where he becomes eventually, by the end of the film, this iconic character we know as Joker. And that's what the film's about, is the descent into his full-on mental collapse.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what the film is about. I think we'll get into spoilers a little later if you haven't seen the film already. But for now, we'll talk about what we can. And um, would you like to open with anything?
Um, Obviously, Joaquin Phoenix does a good job in this film, but I think one that I haven't heard as much about that I also think did a great job, Zazie Beetz.
Yeah,
Good performance.
I think she's always good.
I have not seen her in something yet that I have not appreciated her performance.
You remember Slice?
The pizza one?
Yeah.
I still liked her though.
Yeah, I mean it was a fun movie. It wasn't a good movie, but it was a
Slice?
fun,
I do remember
silly
that
movie.
One. It was like a ghost pizza zombie place or something.
Where Chance the Rapper plays a werewolf?
Yeah, I remember watching that. I don't remember much about
that
it,
was
but
a
I do remember
ridiculous
watching
movie.
that one.
It wasn't phenomenal, but it was entertaining for its
She
short
was
run
still
time.
good though.
Yeah, and I will say, yeah, she was very good in this movie. I think she's excellent.
I challenge the viewers to suggest to us a movie where she does a bad performance because I'd love to see it because just everything I've seen her in, she's so good.
Yeah.
And she's pretty.
It's one thing we agree on is we're both big Zazie Beetz fans.
Yeah.
So we go gaga over her.
Yeah.
The film, like, I will say, the thing that strikes me most just instantly off the bat within the first 20 to 30 minutes is just all the technical aspects. Like, the score is phenomenal. It's I don't want to butcher her last name, so I won't try, but it's by this Icelandic composer.
Okay.
She won the Academy Award for it, making it the first woman to ever win an Academy Award for original score composition, which is really cool, and she did an amazing job. She's a great Icelandic composer. But even then, like, going back and looking at it, I was just struck by how good the cinematography, the lighting, sound editing, all of that was. Costumes, like, all of the technical aspects.
The color palettes they choose are great. I mean, that sounds like a silly thing, but it makes such a striking...
Yes.
Like, against the backgrounds they have, the costume color palettes they're using is amazing to me. Because I'm like, wow, that's really tapping into the mood they want you to access.
They're really looking at what they want the film to look like and how that corresponds with the mood and the feeling of the film, and it works so perfectly. Mm-hmm. I think that is the film's strongest suit, personally, is just the look. It looks and sounds amazing. Like, everything about it, you feel the mood.
Here's the thing. I was worried it was going to be pretty kind of like... Well, we saw it in the theaters back in whenever it came out, October.
Yep. We saw it October 6th.
Before quarantine, when you could go out in public, we saw it. But I remember going into it, I was worried. I wanted to see it, but I was also really worried. I don't know if you remember that I wasn't going to like it. Because I really thought it was going to be, like, incredulously pretentious. I just thought it was going to be just really, like, actors patting themselves so hard on the back their freaking hands fall off.
Yeah.
But I love it. I think it's right on the line. And I'm telling you, my favorite part about this is that it's a good view and a good reflection of the mental health care system in this country and the lack of emphasis we put on caring for our mental health. And obviously this is extreme. Not everybody that's not able to access mental health care is going to turn into the Joker and shoot people. Wow, I almost gave spoilers before time. But yeah.
Everyone knows where it's going to go eventually, though.
Yeah.
And for the first half of the film, I agree. It is a brilliant deconstructive commentary on what America does with its mental health care system. I feel like it side skirts that point later on, however, when it tries to shoehorn in the fact that it is based in comic book roots. So I feel like the film is confused whether it wants to talk about the mental health care system or reference an homage like comic book nature.
Sure.
So the film tries to do both, and to me it feels
A little
just
muddled.
a little muddled and just unfocused and unclear because it switches in between the halves. Like it's like two halves basically. There's the one half where it's about the mental health care, and the second half
Interesting.
it goes into shoehorns in my opinion, a lot of comic book stuff, which I didn't think was necessary.
I didn't get that
Personally,
feeling.
I really felt like the inclusion of Thomas Wayne, like bringing him more into the forefront, wasn't necessary.
So, can we go ahead and say spoilers that are. We're going to talk
Okay,
about
sure.
spoilers.
Spoilers from here on. If you have not seen the film,
Because I
stop the
can't
video.
talk anymore until I can use the spoilers.
Yes, so we're going to talk about spoilers from here on. Stop the video now if you have not seen the film and you do not want it spoiled.
So, sorry, yawning. Thomas Wayne. Okay, I don't like the side running story that, oh, the mom, like, you find out how, like, we know the mom is trying to contact Thomas Wayne. We know she used to work for him. And then you find out halfway through, like, oh, that's his dad. But then it's like, but wait, that's not his dad. But also, is that not his dad? But he's adopted. But also, is he not just adopted, but he had a severe head injury as a child, like, from an abusive boyfriend of his adopted mom. And I'm like, so there's a lot going on here. And I don't like it. I think it's a waste of space. I think they could have picked one of those things. There were too many things.
But isn't it ultimately this, like, insane, jumbled, nonsensical, confused psyche that is what makes the Joker, though?
Yeah, but there was too much. They had 3 storylines that could have easily played on the Joker. It could have been, oh my god, his dad is Batman's dad. You know what I mean? And that would have been fucked up in itself.
And it plays with the viewer, and you don't get a clear answer because you're not sure who to trust with that. But that's my issue, is that it does all this whole little tango where it's like, is Thomas Wayne his father? Is he not? And it even has a scene where he goes up to Bruce Wayne and Alfred interrupts, and it's like, I don't feel like that's necessary, per se, to ultimately get this feeling. Like, we could have had Thomas Wayne as a side character throughout the film, and I don't think it would have changed anything. In fact, I think it would have made it stronger as a piece about the mental health care system.
But do you see what I'm saying too, though? Like, literally all 3 of those could have been their own thing. It could have been that he was adopted, and then it could have been, well, he's a Joker. He has no origin. Yeah. Or it could have been that was his mom, and his dad had abused him and given him severe head trauma. No. All 3 was, like, compounding. It was, like, too much.
Yeah, but I feel like that was the intention. With a character like this who's never been given a proper origin, I feel like that was Todd Phillips' intention, because he's like, it's a bold move to make an origin on the Joker. So I'm just going to throw out a bunch of ideas and let the viewer decide for themselves, but throw them red herrings and kind of mess with them along the way. Like, I feel like it was very much an intentional choice.
How do you feel about the relationship he has with Zazie Beetz' character, or doesn't have, rather?
So we're in spoiler territory. So he has this interesting connection with his, it's a fellow woman who lives in the same apartment building as him and his mother. They spark a romance, and then you realize it was perhaps all in his head, and
yeah,
I feel like it was just a red herring, and it was to further show his mental instability to his ultimate collapse at the end. And I think there's the final scene when you realize that she and him do not have this relationship you think they have, that I think ultimately it leads to a great ambiguous scene of what happens next, but that's ultimately, like, that's the point of when you know this collapse has started.
Right. I mean, I feel like I said earlier, they just sort of skim over, like, this kind of a really quick scene of, oh, sorry, no more medication. We don't have any more funding, and he can't get any more. And then it just popped right back into his regular life. And you as the viewer, it seems for a large portion that life is going well for him. He's at comedy clubs, and he's doing well. Yep. He's got this pretty girlfriend. They're doing well. You know what I mean? It seems like things are going to go his way. It doesn't really truly break the, like, facade, per se, until he goes into her apartment and she's like, why are you here? I don't know who you are. And that's when you realize it's like a second life he's built in his head.
Yep.
Because of the mental illness, whatever he's suffering from, this weird thing that makes you laugh.
And that's a great thing I appreciate about the film, is it has multiple moments of ambiguity, and that is like the first one where like you get that his relationship he built for her was all in his head, but what happens to her after, it's kind of reminiscent of Coen Brothers' adaptation of No Country for Old Men, even though that's perhaps a little more obvious, especially if you read the book, but still, like, the Anton Chigurh, like, what he did with Carla Jean after that meeting, it doesn't explicitly state anything in that film. And this film does a similar thing, but it heavily implies a certain direction, which I really like. And one of the things that underwhelmed me upon first viewing was how everyone who saw the film and coming out of the film, all they could talk about was how, like, dark and bleak the film was. And I've watched a lot of really extremely dark films, so I was expecting just something, like, pitch dark, and I don't know, I felt like I didn't quite get that. On second viewing, I get a little more bleakness, but on first viewing, it just wasn't quite as dark as I'd originally anticipated it being.
I think part of that might have to do with the palate of the person, because yes. I actually know somebody, a friend of mine, who's told me straight up they went in to see Joker and they left like 30 minutes in and asked for a refund to see something else because they couldn't stomach it. And I remember thinking going in, gosh, this is going to be rough. But I think it depends. I think if you have weak spots,
yeah, I will
in your, your own, in emotionally frail people, I don't think would enjoy this as much.
Yeah, so I will say it is extremely bleak and dark for a mainstream film. Absolutely.
However, 95% of what I watch is like The Little Mermaid, and yeah. I was fine.
I really went in expecting her to hate this film and was very surprised that she didn't. I
think it's a higher level thinking film as well, in a way. Like, I'm not trying... that sounds really crappy, but that's not what I'm trying to say. This is not a... who's the guy that did the Batman movies that I love so much?
Joel Schumacher?
Yeah, this is not a Joel Schumacher Batman. Poison Ivy is not in a gorilla suit, and when she takes the head off, it's this synthetic orange Spirit of Halloween wig. Right. This is like...
and it's substantially darker than the Christopher Nolan Batman films
even
as well.
Those, yeah.
Those are really dark.
And those are spooky. Yeah, I feel like those are spooky.
Those were
whereas
dark.
Whereas this one was...
I think the Burton ones got spooky. I think the Nolan ones were just dark crime thrillers that were Batman films.
The Burton ones are the ones with Danny DeVito as Penguin?
Yeah.
And Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, those are like twisty, creepy.
Yeah.
But like, it's not the campy. I think a lot of people expect a certain amount of camp. Including me. I frickin' love those Joel Schumacher ones. Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze with all the freaking puns. ice party. Like, I love it. I can't stand
Cool
it.
party.
Cool party. That's what it is. I
Yeah.
love it. We should watch that tonight.
There's an audience for that. I mean, those movies, like, are fun if you just take them for what they are. I mean, I won't say they're good, but they're entertaining as hell. But this film, I do appreciate that it goes a bold new direction that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Some issues I had, though, aside from the obvious one where I think it's split down the middle of if it wants to be this whole dissertation on the lack of funding for mental health care versus comic book nature. Another issue I had is, like, very well-known actors playing the tiniest side characters.
Oh, yeah,
like
that
stunt
bothered
casting.
you.
Yeah, the stunt casting. Like, Shea Whigham, Mark Maron, and Brian Tyree Henry are in this film. It's distracting for me because I would rather, like, have a different actor playing those roles.
Which one is Shea Whigham?
Shea Whigham is one of the detectives. He's not as well known.
That person I never would have. The other two I recognize.
As like a huge David Gordon Green fan, like All the Real Girls is one of my favorite movies. Shea Whigham is like a big part of that film, so to me it's like every time I see Shea Whigham, I'm like, yeah, man, Shea Whigham.
Well,
so when I saw this film, I was like, oh, Shea Whigham, and then he doesn't really do much. Mark Maron, I think is the biggest stunt casting because he's there, and it's like we could have easily cast my father in that role. Like, if my father grew his beard back, he'd kind of look like Mark Maron in this film. He was Robert De Niro's assistant.
Yeah.
And then Brian Tyree Henry, like, it's a one-scene role.
Brian Tyree Henry is hot, and I had no problem with him being in this for one scene, because that was one scene where I got to look at Brian Tyree Henry.
I love him as an actor.
I love you, Brian Tyree Henry.
Well, at least said I love you, Brian. Said I love you, Brian. But yeah, I accept her feelings about Brian Tyree Henry.
All right.
But I really feel like his, like, scene was really distracting because he's such a well-known actor at this point from his work on Atlanta and in various other things. So that just to have him there as that one small
Child's
role.
Play.
Oh, Child's Play. I forgot about that one.
I still love you, Brian Tyree Henry. It was bad, though.
He did his best with it, but that movie was forgettable.
So
but I just feel like it was extremely pointless, and it kind of took me out of the feeling of this movie because I would be pointing out, like, oh, hey, it's Brian Tyree Henry. Oh, hey, it's Shea Whigham. Oh, hey, it's Mark Maron. And
fair enough.
That was an issue I had. There was another one I had I was just thinking of till we got sidetracked.
That there wasn't more screen time with Brian Tyree Henry.
I mean, if he had a bigger role, it would have been fine. But oh, I know. So one thing about this film is it's very much a mashup of Scorsese's Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, in which they do the mashup well, like going right down to De Niro playing the Jerry Lewis role and Joaquin Phoenix being the De Niro role in King of Comedy. And the whole film is basically like this Joker character being Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver. And it's really good, but at the same time, when I watch the film, like half the time I'm like, I'd rather be watching Taxi Driver, and the other half, I'd rather be watching King of Comedy, because I'm a huge fan of both those movies. Those are like two of my top two.
We watched King of Comedy, right?
No, we did not.
No?
No, we
what
haven't
am I
watched
thinking
that.
of?
I don't know, but...
Some other clown movie.
No, there are no clowns in King of Comedy.
What's the clown movie we watched?
Shakes the Clown.
That was bad. Alright, go ahead.
I love that movie, but that's not for this review. But the film is basically a send-up and an homage to both of those. That's why Scorsese was involved early on as an executive producer, but he left the project because he just didn't really care. He didn't really have his heart in it, and he goes, you guys can do what you want, but just don't have my name. I'm too busy executive producing Uncut Gems.
Ooh, that was a good one. So, let's talk about the final scene and then wrap it up.
Yeah, the final scene. Alright, and the final scene is what makes me teeter my opinion. It's very ambiguous because he murders the talk show host played by Robert De Niro, and this whole riot is going on. He's arrested by the police. He gets broken out of the cop car by these rioters who have stolen an ambulance, and he's on top of the cop car, basically watching this chaos he has created.
And it should have stopped awesome. Right there.
Would have been an awesome ending,
in my opinion.
But then it cuts to him being interviewed by a psychologist in this mental institution.
Is it a psychologist?
Or psychiatrist. I'm not sure if they study medicine or not.
I don't know.
Yes.
That's why I was asking.
It doesn't really say if it's a psychologist or psychiatrist. Maybe a psychiatrist, actually.
Doctor.
Yeah, I don't think she was prescribing medicine, so it was probably psychiatrist. Regardless, though, and he starts laughing, and she asks him what he's laughing about, and then you get a quick glimpse of Bruce Wayne with his parents dead, which it shows you, once again, the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. As if we haven't seen that enough in film already, but this film wanted to go ahead and do it again. But it shows that, and then he says, "You wouldn't get it." And then it leaves you with this ambiguity, like, was he in this asylum the entire time, and the whole film was in your head? Or was he brought back to it because he's clearly insane? And I don't think there's a clear answer. I think that's up to your own interpretation. My favorite interpretation is that he was in the asylum the entire time, and just the fall of Thomas Wayne made him laugh, which ultimately created Batman, which would then make even more sense for the rise of Joker here on out. That's my personal favorite interpretation.
I like that interpretation, I guess, because until he pointed that out to me, it was never crossed my mind that it could be that this was all fake. However, what's the beef is my question then. If he made all this up in his head, why did we do this? What origin were we telling? Why? Unless if that's the case, the only origin we have is that this guy is super duper cuckoo bananas, and he has just straight up picked a random government official, which would be Thomas Wayne, right? That's it. That's his target. That's what I'm getting from that, which it lends to comic book lore, because then you still didn't really get a backstory for him. But I think it's kind of a cop-out, because if you're going to do a backstory for Joker, do a backstory for Joker. I mean, I liked the film as it was. I see how it could be interpreted both ways, but I just have to play devil's advocate and be like, then it's not a backstory for a Joker. It makes me actually really hate the film if that's how it's meant to be interpreted.
I think that's why they created the ambiguity, is just to please both parties, probably, because...
Insert Harvey Dent coin flip. So, alright.
Yeah, what would you rate it? With your own interpretation, it's ambiguous, so...
Have I given anything a 10? I haven't, right?
Close to you've given a film is a 9.
And what was that?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, yeah. I'd say this is also a 9, but in a different way than Who Framed Roger Rabbit. We haven't hit a 10 film yet. There's only one film. I wouldn't even give The Little Mermaid a 10 out of 10. There's only one film I would give a 10 out of 10. Little Mermaid's garbage. She's 16. She shouldn't be acting like that. I love it. But it's got...
You can give a film a 10
weak sauce.
Without thinking like the film itself is a 10.
Well, joke's on you. There's only one film in the world that deserves a 10 to me, thus far, that I have seen. And when it comes, you will all know. But yeah, I would give it a 9. What about you?
Upon this viewing, I've teetered on where I would rank it, but I would go a 7.25 for me, because I think the film has its share of weaknesses that it could have focused more on things, but the ambiguity kind of tilts it in different scales, and I appreciate that. And Joaquin's performance, not my favorite by him, but still a very good performance. And the technical aspects are incredible, so I would say a 7.25.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, that's our review of Joker. Like and subscribe.
Yeah, please.
I'd also like to give a shout out to my buddy Jay. He's got a new podcast, Jay versus Horror. Last week he invited me on to be the co-host and co-interviewer on the episode where we interviewed Daniel Ferrans, writer of Halloween 6 and director of Crystal Lake Memories and Never Sleep Again, as well as several other films. That's a very, very interesting interview. So definitely check it out, Jay vs. Horror. You can check it on Spotify.
Go, Jay, go. Jay's been a big supporter of us since we started, too.
Yes, he has.
So I
I
want to give him
appreciate
the love
that.
back.
Yes, thank you, Jay. And I should be back on the next episode of his podcast as well. We'll be interviewing Michael Levy, who's been involved in the Terrifier films. He was an actor in the first one, and he's a producer on the upcoming sequel.
Nice.
So that'll be coming up soon as well. So
Right.
check out Jay vs. Horror on Spotify, or you can Google it. It's on several sources, but Spotify is the most popular. But anyway, also, like and subscribe, Married Cinema.
Yeah, please leave us some suggestions below.
Suggestions below, comments, let us know what you thought.
I mean, we watched that one. I mean, shoot.
Yeah.
So what was the... what's the one?
Possession.
Possession. We watched Possession. I'll watch what you suggest. Sure.
Just don't go too extreme.
Insert lady screaming and slamming a bag of milk all across the wall like Possession.
Who else is gonna slam the bag of milk? Really?
Really, truly. All right, guys. Thank you, and see you next time.
Bye.